skies will be filled with the greatest air armada the world has ever seen. Our own Army Air Forces, the best planes ever built, 65,000 planes this year. And by the time you finish your training, America will have overwhelming superiority in the air.
Thanks a lot. And we're just going to get started today. It's just a lot to cover. A lot was going on, and we're going to look at the aircraft. We're going to talk about the P-47. We're actually going to do a virtual walk-around in here as well. And then we're going to try to talk a little bit about how we take this weapon and employ it on the battlefield. Now, a lot of people were asking me this morning about, I was in the Army. I was in the Army for 32 years, so I was on the ground doing a lot of things. I'm going to speak as a ground commander using Air Force support in that sense. So we'll talk about close air support and some of the things over there. And as we cover that and get towards the end, it's important to just identify the P-47, the pilots, and these veterans that did all the things that they do to make it successful, certainly in the 1940s and further on today. And we'll certainly do a Q&A later on at the end of the show. Just real quickly, we'll do a quick walk around. Talk about veterans. That's Lieutenant Cottrell, 103 years old, did all the things that we're going to discuss today and passed away in 2025, so a big storied career there. That's Alexander Kartvelli, one of the designers of this aircraft that we're going to talk about. This is Evansville, Illinois, and Indiana. That's one of the factories where they built the P-47. Look at the number of people that are involved in that. I wonder what that union looks like. You know, and there's Gabby Gabreski, which we're going to talk about today. And he didn't give me that signature, but I got some artifacts from people in town and in Denver and so forth, and I just wanted to post his picture there. So the P-47 Thunderbolt, we're just going to move on and talk about some of the origins. Think about the 1930s. What was really going on in the 1930s? It was a depression. There were a lot of things going on. 1/3 of the economy was, only 25% unemployment at that time. And oh, by the way, war was brewing in Europe. And people just didn't, they were still stung from World War I. 20 million people were killed in World War. Who wants to get into another conflict at that point? But all the intelligence that was coming back from Europe in the 30s, late 30s, was bad. We were way hollowed out. The military had 300,000 for all services. That was it. We had to do something to develop an aircraft or a weapon that can compete with the Germans and the Japanese. So they came out with some requirements at that point. And you can see well, that moved pretty quick. There it is. So one of the guys did it, showed me how to do that, so I had to do it. But anyway, this is the requirements. It had to be big. It was something that was bigger than any. It weighed a lot, 400 miles an hour. Could go high altitude, over 25,000. Lots of armament, 50 caliber machine guns, lots of armor plating for the pilot and so forth. And then as a result of that, we have Alexander Seversky and Alexander Kartvelli, Russian refugees. Does that sound familiar? Russian refugees left the Soviet Union after the revolt in 1917, came to the United States with several other aviation engineers and put together Seversky Aircraft Company, which eventually became Republic, and that's what we'll talk about today. They actually, in 1935, established the P-35, the P-43, all the way up to the P-47. Progenitor. My wife was helping me out, and I said, I don't even know what that word means, progenitor. It's a direct descendant, the P-35 to the P-47. Actually, they had the P-35 was in the Philippines during the bombing of Pearl Harbor, and the P-43 was in the China theater as well. But you can see the development of the engine, 1830 to 2180, 2800 engine, the R2800 engine was the sweet spot for World War II. Once they got to that point, 2,000 pounds, 2,000 horsepower, that's where they mass produced. Over 100,000 R2800 engines were produced. And when that happened, Alexander Kartveli decided, he said, we're going to build around that. And that's what we have over here when you look at this aircraft. 17,000 pounds. And it has a turbo-supercharger, which we're actually going to talk about, which can get this aircraft well over 400 miles an hour. And the result was something that was produced well over 15,000 aircraft. The key to all of this on this slide is a robust design. This thing can get shot up. There's numerous stories of where it was smoking, oil leaks, hydraulic leaks, and it was still able to land. Our Army Air Force used it. The Royal Air Force used it. More than 20 nations used the P-47 Thunderbolt. That's how successful it really is. So you're talking about quite a weapon here. This is just a little picture, just to give you an idea. That dark silhouette is the P-47. Everything fits inside of it. So you have German aircraft, you have Japanese aircraft, you have the Brits, and you have the P-51 Mustang, all fit inside of this aircraft. And we're not going to do that today, but you could actually see it. This over here just gives you an idea of what the models were. Initially, it was designed as the Razorback, and I just want to make, I always have trouble with this definition. I don't know why. But basically, it just says that it was a tall, narrow fuselage with a conventional canopy. And the pilots didn't like it. Why not? Why would they not like it? It's hard to, go ahead. You can't see. And then you're in trouble. That's it. So what they wanted was the bubble top, and that's what we have right there, the bubble top, so the pilot can see all around. Thanks a lot for doing all that. And here we have a picture of the Razorback, and here's the one at the museum, not doing so well. It was found in New Guinea, and it brought up, and so eventually that is gonna look like that someday, and probably in his lifetime, right there. And just the distribution of the aircraft, the different models. Obviously, the P-47 Delta is the one that was most produced at Farmingdale, New York, and Evansville, Indiana, which we talked about a little bit earlier. The Republic Aviation, Alexander Kartveli, have a long history. I just want to say the guy who founded this aircraft has a long history. Obviously, the P-47 Thunderbolt, influence into the A-10 Thunderbolt II, which they merged with Fairchild Aviation. But look down here, the F-84 Republic jet and the F-105. This guy actually used to carry nukes during the Cold War. And over here, the F-105 Thunder Chief has a bomb load of 14,000 pounds, more than any World War II aircraft that was out there. Also, which was kind of amazing as well, is that Republic, while Kartveli was still with them in 1960, they wanted an aerospace plane. What is that? It's something that actually takes off the runway on Earth and goes up into space and lands back in Peterson Air Force Base or Space Force Base, where it lands over there. It was the early progenitor of the space shuttle. So, yeah, they were everywhere. They were on all kinds of stuff. Whoops. Oh, you've heard, what is the P-47? It's a juggernaut, right? But when I was looking it up and doing a little research, you remember in the old days, the milk jug? I remember that. You put the plane on its nose and stand it up, you could just pick it up by the tail, just like, and have a glass of milk right there. 'Cause it was so heavy. 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 So let's just do a walk around. It's just a familiarization. I know some of you guys know a lot and that kind of thing, but I think it's just important to take a. This is the product. 2,500 bomb load on those wings, 40,000 foot altitude, well over 400. And again, it's the same thing over and over again. High survivability. The guys didn't like it at the beginning, from what I read and talked about. But once they got into that aircraft and just started to fly, and they felt safe that they were going to, even if they lost a couple of, they were going to be able to make it home. And that's key to everything, right? All you guys, the veterans. Semi-elliptical wings, I'm not even sure. But basically, that was good for lift, getting off the ground for the bomb load and so forth. But, there's a lot of issues about construction and that kind of thing. But he has, again, all the things necessary to keep them alive. The R2800 engine, we talked about, it's a funny picture. You have all those mechanics over there. But think about it. I'm a ground commander. I'm on the ground with 15,000 troops in a division. How much logistics do I have behind me? Probably twice as many. 20, 25, 30,000 troops and or civilian and by the way, contractors. I don't know if it's SAIC or something like that, but they're in the back. And it goes all the way to France, up into the UK, all the way back to Conus. And that train has to be long and it has to be tight if you're going to win that war. Huge propeller system. You can see it there. 4-blade propeller, 13 feet in diameter over there. Here's the key, the heart to the whole thing, and I'm going to keep it simple. It has a supercharger system that's attached to the motor, and it spins all the time and gets this guy up to 20, 25,000 feet or so. The next thing that kicks in is the turbo-supercharger. And basically what that does is it just captures the exhaust gases, puts them back in and compresses them, and you have a cooling system that comes in from the air duct over here, cools those exhaust gases, and throws it back into the engine, and just gives them that extra boost to get it to where it needs to be to have the advantage over those German fighters and the Japanese and so forth. The pilot has to manage all of this stuff. Think of what he's doing in there. Right, Alan? Think of what he's doing. He's managing all those systems that are going on. While this supercharger is going, he's managing the RPMs for that. There's a whole booster part of the throttle system that he has to manage as well. And oh, by the way, he's looking at the oil cooler and the intercooler system. Because what happens if it overheats? It's going to blow up. And you don't want that. So you have to do all those things. A lot of issues early on with the P-47 were what? No range. Didn't have enough fuel. It could only go like 800, 900. I'm going to keep kicking that. Keep about 800, 900 miles. That was about it. But when you add those external fuel tanks, he's going to double it. And later on in the war, the P-47 was actually able to take off from England and go all the way into Germany with those bombers, escort them in, and take them back as well. Okay? Great armament. You see the 8 guns on there, 8 machine guns, 425 rounds per gun, 3,400 rounds, 100 rounds per second. Who wants to be in front of that thing when it's going on? What is with the pilot? Here's a question. If he's holding that trigger with 100 rounds per second, how much ammo does he have? About 30 seconds, 30, 45 seconds. So he has to be real judicious about how he uses that ammo. And we'll talk about that a little bit. All kinds of bombs, 100 pounds all the way up to 1,000 pounds of the bomb load. You can see it on the wings. Rockets. You have a tube system, 4.5-inch, HVAR. What does that mean? High velocity aircraft rocket, 5.5 inch, and we'll have a little demo on that. I have some simulator thing, so I'll show you. The radio system, you guys would know this. It's a simple VHF radio system, 4 channels, critical when this guy is flying and he's managing all these turbo systems and stuff like that, but he has to communicate with his flight out on the ground, all that coordination that's going on. 4-channel system. Remember in the old days, when you had a car and you used to press the transmission, it was park, and then same thing over here. You guys remember that, right? Yeah, oh, sure. And then same thing here. Without that comms, it's a tough world, that's for sure. Here's the K-14 gun sight. It's actually cutting-edge technology. We don't have one here, but there's in the P-40 Delta 30 and Delta 40 models, they had the K-14 gun sight. You actually have a wingspan dial over there. What is that? The pilot, in the middle of everything else that he's doing, he has to manage. If it's a single engine, like another fighter, the 30-foot wingspan. 2 engines, it would be a 60. 4-engine bomber would be 120 feet that he has to engage at each one of those. The fixed reticle, he could keep the reticle system on or take it off as needed for it. And then there's the range dial. 60 feet, that means that the enemy is 60 feet in front of him, or he's 2,400 feet away. So if the reticle is if he's 2,400, it would shrink, and if he's close, it would widen. And we'll get a demonstration on that. All that, the range dial, is controlled. You actually have it on the throttle system. So if he goes clockwise, then it gets smaller. As you pull back, and this guy's coming close, it enlarges, and you'll get to see that a little bit. So there it is. Here's what he's looking at. That's the circle with diamonds, and that you want him on the center. This is an ideal target. And oh, by the way, you get him in the target, and you got to leave him there for a second. The pilot has to do that while he's going 400 miles an hour. Leave it there, and then the actual gun sight will calculate what the lead distance is. And as he fires, he'll be able. And all this was done in the 1940s, believe it or not. I'm just going to show you some quick videos. Actually, who has Flight Simulator? You have it, so you understand. That's why I stole it from there. But in Flight Simulator, you could actually buy this aircraft on I didn't. But you could actually buy it and go through some of these systems we're talking about today. So let's take a look at it. So here's that actual system right there. And this pilot is, there's the enemy. And there's the reticle right there. And you can see he wants that dot to get onto that single engine fighter. And you see he's getting further away, the reticle's getting smaller, and he's just doing his testing there. And oh, by the way, right on the dot, he's got him, holds it for a second, and adios muchacho, right there, okay? Here's the dive bombing video that we want to look at as you go in here. This guy, this P-47 actually does a dive bomber, which we've talked about, and we have it here at the museum, the Dauntless, the Helldiver, and so forth. He's coming in at a 45 to 60 degree angle, coming in and starts his bomb run about 3,000 feet. And then he'll do a recovery at 1,000 feet. So boom, he has it there. And then you could actually see it from the ground level, dropping his bombs. But he has a 1,000-foot recovery. He still can be engaged by the flak that was going on over there. Then you have glide bombing, which is not as much of a steep angle, and his release point is 3,000 feet, but also his recovery is about 1,000. And you can see that the center bomb underneath the fuselage right there, he's going to release that and make his recovery over there on the glide bombing. And There he is. You can see him. See the flak going on? And again, this is your flight simulator. There he goes, and he's recovering. Here's a rockets video, just to give you a sense. Oh, what happened? Let me see. Bummer. There it goes. Okay, so he's going to make a turn. He's coming in on the rockets, 2,000 feet, 15 to 20 degree angle. He's going to go perpendicular to the rail car system that he's looking at. It's a little bit hard to see, but you can see the reticle. He's going to actually fire with that crosshairs just a little bit higher than the railroad system. And boom, he takes him up, but it's a low recovery, only 100 feet to get out of Dodge. You can see it from the wing right there. Boom, he did it, and now he's recovering right there. This guy's getting out of the way. You see him on the left? And then here he comes from ground level, and 100 feet, and then he has to get out of Dodge as quickly as possible. Finally, here's a strafing video. Again, coming in at 15 to 20 degrees, well over 200 miles an hour. These guys are going top speed, 250 to 300 miles an hour, perpendicular with the rail car system, but he's using all of his ammo. And oh, by the way, you got to be cautious of all of that. Even on Flight Simulator, they're calculating everything. You're the pilot. And he's going to make a turn and do a column attack, not a perpendicular attack, just to give you a sense of what it's like using your ammo. So he's doing 2 strafing passes. And oh, by the way, I'm out of ammo now. I'm at 100 feet, and I got to get out of Dodge as quickly as possible. And there's a lot of stories of that, where these guys, have to manage fuel and ammo and so forth. Okay? So that's quite a weapon, don't you think? It's something that has a lot of tools that the commanders can use, especially when you're on the battlefield. Because in my mind, as the ground commander, who's primary? It's me. Yeah, I want to make sure that my guys complete the mission, continue on as much as possible. That's where we get into close air support. What is close air support? Obviously, it's a military system, but there's one of many different systems, close air support. Think of the ground commander. He has to manage his personnel. He needs systems that are going to support his operations, his intelligence. Just think about logistics when you guys were in the military. All the food, fuel, ammo, medical, repair parts, and all those kinds of things. And what is it like as a commander when a soldier goes down? And that was one of the things that I did in the military. I was a medical support officer. And I can tell you it's very similar as close air support. A soldier went down. As a ground commander, what do you want to see happen? You want to see that kid get off the ground back to a battalion aid station or some kind of surgeon at a combat support hospital and get the support he needs. And you want immediate response time. You want to know that your kids, your guys are okay. Same thing with the P-47, except this is all military support actions. We're going to define all of that. What is it? The commander is on the ground, and he knows that he needs support immediately up front or in the even further back to loosen up those defenses, loosen up the enemy so he can do what? Remember in the stories, Patton and all that? They want to keep going forward. And that's so the critical. This weapon right here can do all of that. And just a little bit history. World War I is when all of this started. You remember how old was the aircraft? And it was brand new. And they knew right away that was a weapon, but it had so many limitations. But they weren't going to give it up. The Wright brothers invented this aircraft in 1903. What was the first thing they wanted to do? Patent it and sell it to the military. And so you hear all these stories about, you ever been to Fort Myers in Virginia? You go, they flew in that parade field over there. But obviously, a lot of issues with communications, caliber of weapon, the size of bombs, and all that stuff going on. But it wasn't going away. In the interwar period, what was some of the things? Think about it. I'm the ground commander, right? I'm superior. You know, it's my mission. But the Air Force was already talking about, we're looking in Colorado Springs. We want an academy and all that stuff over there. And it's only 1930. They want to separate from as well. So you had a lot of tension going on between these two forces. But they did a lot of practicing during that period. The Brits had their colonials, so they're doing some fighting, testing close air support. The Condor Legion were the Germans, and they were fighting the Spanish Civil War for 3 years. And then we were fighting the Banana Wars in Latin America, developing close air support doctrine. We're prepping for war, right? Who wants to go to war again after World War I? But they're already prepping for it. And we weren't ready, not in any stretch. All of the close air support that we were talking about, which we'll define even a little bit more later, they mobilized hundreds of thousands of troops even before we got involved in the war, trying to test all these systems which we're developing right now. They even published a field manual in 1942 and kept people separate. There was no synchronization between the air forces and the ground forces as well. So here we are. Now we're in North Africa. And Eisenhower is ticked off already because there's no good close air support training that's going on. They dumped the previous field manual, published another one, and Air Force is still separate from the ground commanders. Nobody's getting along. And who suffers when these commanders are fighting? The troops. The guys on the ground, the kids that have been drafted and so forth. But we're going to talk about how important it is to have air superiority and already developing that interdiction way in the back to try to stop the logistics train for the Germans and the Japanese, keeping them back, and you want to prevent them from moving forward in any way. So those are the two things right there that are critical. Finally, in Sicily and in Italy, they developed a system called Rover Joe and Horsefly. Make it real simple, because what is close air support? We're trying to guide these aircraft. We're guiding the P-47s into enemy territory. Rover Joe, what does that sound like? On the ground. You actually had Air Force personnel working with armor and infantry officers to try and synchronize your attacks and so forth. And what is a horsefly? We actually have one of the aircraft here, the Sentinels. You know, those Sentinels that are going around. Who wants this job? You're in a Sentinel going over enemy territory trying to draw in fire. So you know where to locate. And I would say, I'm going to call up Alan in the P-47 to come in. But oh, by the way, I'm being attacked right now. But they had good communications, good maps, imagine that, photos, good comms, and that kind of thing. So the Horsefly was in the air. The Rover Joe is on the ground, and you can see over there. And oh, by the way, if you don't direct these aircraft to attack in the immediate front, which is what? Very dangerous over there, what's going to happen? General Bradley was strafed 3 times. You're killing your officers, you know. So all of that is going on, and but there's the key right there is that your force and your resources are dedicated to those landing forces that were going on in Sicily and in Italy. That was being developed, because what comes next after Sicily and Italy? It's actually boy, this thing jumps around. And it's the Normandy invasion, D-Day. And what happened June 6, 1944? We actually captured all those beachheads, believe it or not. We got through all that successfully. But what happened after? We got stuck. The whole thing about close air support and moving fast, going through France, over on into Germany, we got stuck for weeks. Operation Cobra was what needed to happen at that point. Again, a lot of issues about the Horsefly and those heavy bombers and the medium bombers doing close air support with a B-17. Could you imagine that? And there was fratricide and things going on there. Mixed reviews about how things were going. But air superiority was key. That allowed us to further develop the close air support. It kind of culminated finally after, oh, by the way, just a little prejudice, when Patton was activated in the Third Army, they called it armored column cover. And that was developed. What it did finally was armored column cover. We'll talk about General Quesada, who was really the author of this technique and this doctrine. But they dedicated this guy right here, two of them. This is a simple definition of what's going on. Dedicated P-47s to these armor units. To Patton, Patton talked a lot about armor, and other generals as well. As they're going forward, and he was struggling or got stuck, these P-47s were just waiting, patrolling to when you would call them in. Close air support recon could be sometimes 30 miles ahead. You had good comms with the tankers. You had good comms with the Air Force personnel. Everybody's working in sync. And oh, by the way, they're using the latest technology, microwave early warning system. And what is that? It's just radar. He could see, the armor you could see way out, 10, 20, 30 miles. If there was a hint of some kind of enemy force coming in to stop those tankers from movement, they would call in the P-47s to do that. Finally, even at one point, the air liaison officer was actually in the tank with the other personnel, and you had entire crews that were Air Force, except for the guy driving the tank, probably. But they were there maneuvering the close air support, evaluating the intelligence, evaluating those requests that are coming down. I have a mission, I'm stuck, I need something to keep me moving as quickly as possible. What they also did was they dedicated P-47s to be relieved every 30 minutes. So as those P-47s are there, taking care of the commander, they'll park, and the next group would come in and keep them. That's immediate response time. And I can tell you, as a ground commander, it's a good day when you can call people in like that. Who's this guy, General Quesada? Just a great patriot, a great American from Washington, D.C., 25 years in the Air Force, had a storied career, had some world endurance records, 150 hours in a plane. Sounds like he was stuck at DIA or something. And but he could fly P-38s, P-51s, obviously the P-47. He was part of the D-Day planners. I lost the light there. Part of the D-Day planning team. He flew the supreme commander around to show him the emplacements, the defensive positions, how they were going to go in and attack, and just a deep sense of public duty. Even after all of that, he became the first FAA administrator in 1958. And oh, by the way, he was any pilots here? There's got to be pilots. The pilots, he put up the regulation that said pilots are only good until they're 60, and that's it. They have to retire. And oh, by the way, if you want to be a commercial pilot, you have to be a veteran of World War II or Korea, and then you can be hired as a commercial. But I don't think that regulation ever went through. But I think, what is it now? 65, you can be a pilot or something like that, commercial. Even after all of that, he went into the Redevelopment Corporation to help refurbish his hometown of Washington, D.C. You guys been to D.C., right? Elephant Plaza, Pennsylvania Avenue and all that stuff going on. So just a great American, did so much for the close air support, the generals in World War II in France, going into Germany. Thank you very much for those kinds of things. The bottom line on all this, on close air support, is what? When you're talking in 1945, getting close to the end of the war, we had unlimited logistics support. And what is that? We had unlimited P-47s coming out, all types of aircraft, all types of food, medical personnel, repair parts. The logistics trail was super serviceable. You called something in, you had close air support even within a minute. You had that. It was a great example in a major theater of war to go from who's in charge, we're separate, we're a separate force, the heck with him, the heck with her, things like that, to where there was a good synchronization and the type of techniques and doctrine we use today in the military in 2025. But it came with a cost. And those early days, soldiers suffered for those kinds of stupid mistakes that the higher-ups actually made. And they had to iron out, going all the way back to World War I. Okay? Oh, and so to just move on a little bit to talk about some of the P-47 veterans that were going on. During World War II, over 470 soldiers in the theater of World War II, Asia and Europe, 470 people were awarded the Medal of Honor. Okay, how many P-47 pilots actually got the Medal of Honor? Does anybody know? 2. That was it. Yeah, probably more, you would think. One of those is, we talked about him before, is Colonel Kirby. And he was a P-47 pilot, probably one of the best commanders we had in the South Pacific. We talk a lot about Europe, but oh, by the way, the South Pacific. What did he do? He had 4 P-47s. It was him and his flight. 4 P-47s, one up against 40 Japanese aircraft. Who does that? And the 12-to-1 odds. At the end of the day, they shot down about 9 Japanese aircraft at that time, and not one of Colonel Kirby's people were injured or killed during that. He had the opportunity, and we'll talk about this a little bit as we go on. What happens when you are the recipient of the Medal of Honor? What's the first thing the commander does? He says, you can leave theater, get out of here. You did your duty, go home. Or do something. What do? They go back, they're in headquarters. Remember the term REMF? Don't say it. But remember the term, you earned that kind of thing. Colonel Kirby refused to do that. He wouldn't do it. As commander, I'm staying with my troops. And unfortunately, what happened to him? He was killed in action. Lieutenant Wright, he was the other one. I'm sorry, I'm covering you up there. He's 22 years old. And same thing with him. The war is over. And he's in Italy. And what happened? He volunteered to attack a German airfield that was adjacent to his headquarters. And that was a threat to his soldiers and his unit. And for 2 days, he did 10-plus strafing missions. The first day, he actually obviously survived. Aircraft was shot up completely, but he was able to make it home because he had a P-47 and he had the armor and that kind of thing in there. The second day, he went back up, took a different P-47, did some more strafing missions, and destroyed 13 aircraft, disabled the German airfield, no longer a threat. And the P-47 was virtually destroyed. Oil leaks, hydraulic leaks, had lost flight control systems and things like that, crashed into the Italian mountains. And and was killed at that, and was posthumously awarded the P-40, M Medal of Honor. And he was the last Air Force personnel to receive the Medal of Honor in World War II. So what, just a little thing, just a kind of a side note on everything else as we're talking some of the things that are going on. One of my jobs when I was in the military was when I was in Virginia, we actually were part of the committee to dedicate the World War II Memorial. You guys been over there? You've all seen that and that kind of thing. In 2004 is when they did the dedication. One of the things, we had several different dining outs and all that stuff, but we got to meet table full of Medal of Honor recipients during the World War II vets. And this was 25 years ago, so they were, 80. They were basically much younger at that time. And we got to talk to them quite a bit. Part of our job was to talk to the Medal of Honor recipients, get to know them, hear their story. What is their common theme on everything else going on during that period? Was that I feel guilty. I'm here. Buddies and my comrades went down overseas. How do we honor them? The best way to do that. And the conclusion we came up with all of that was the best way to honor those soldiers that went down was to have a life when you got home, be productive, live in freedom, live in the security that I died for over there. So that's really what happened. Don't be guilty. You're still, do something to make things better. This guy did that. This was one of them, Colonel Gabreski, famous P-47 pilot of World War II. Great story in a lot of ways because we have a lot of tours that go on here at the museum I have with students that come in. And I always like to tell his story and his bio. I'm in everybody's way, sorry. In his bio, because it's a good story about never giving up. He was told several times, you are not going to be a pilot. You don't have the, quote, right stuff. You're clumsy or whatever. You have trouble managing your turbo systems or something like that. And he said, keep going, and right all the way up to an elimination check, and finally became a pilot because he never gave up. That's him right there. He was actually in Pearl Harbor December 7th, 1941, and he made it that far. Never gave up, became the highest scoring ace in the European theater, flew 166 missions. He's another one. He had orders to go home, met every gate, combat time, over 300 hours, everything he needed. Gabby, go home. You've had it. You've done it all, that kind of thing. Nah, I'm going to do one more mission. And what happened? He put himself on the roster, went out with the flight, and he flew too low because of flak or whatever, hit the ground and crashed, obviously survived, became a POW toward the end of the war and that kind of thing. But what did he do? He lived a full life. He honored those members who went down. He actually was one of the few pilots that became an ace in two different wars, obviously World War II and Korea. 27 years in the Air Force, all kinds of leadership, 5,000 hours. I always found that interesting, 5,000 hours of flight time, but most of it is in jets. And you think of him, and it's the P-47 and that kind of stuff. Lived a full life, retired, worked in the private industry, aviation, Grumman. Actually worked in the Long Island Railroad. I bet that was fun in New York. Probably. But married 48 years and had 9 children. Who has 9 children? Any Catholics here or anything like that? He had 9 children. Many of them were in the military. Many of them were and we actually have some relatives here today from Colonel Gabreski. So just wanted to mention that. And Terry Gabreski was Gabby's daughter-in-law. She became a 3-star general in the Air Force at that time. So just a great story, and I like to tell it all the time and that kind of thing. There's one other I found out today, was a lieutenant, 19 years old, in France, is Lieutenant Keselowski? Keesley. Lieutenant Keesley, 19 years old, veteran. We have some relatives here today from him, and he went down. He was a World War II veteran, was flying in France at the time. 19 years old, the plane, ran out of fuel. And as he was doing a recovery, trying to boost to get out of there, he was trying to get away from a 109 German Messerschmitt. And he actually, as he was coming out of a dive in his P-47, he hit it. He hit the aircraft and crash landed there. And oh, by the way, who recovered him and brought him back to safety? General Patton, as he was coming through at the time. And we have some relatives here today for that. Thanks for that story. And if you want to ask him any questions or anything later. Here's our museum, P-47, right there. We just talk about that real quickly. It was surplus right at the time. A P-47 Delta 40, Evansville, Indiana. We looked at that. Came out in 1945. The war was over. Right away, it became surplus. We put it in a training unit, went into storage, finally became part of a foreign military exchange, went over to Peru, and then became owners by private individuals in the 1970s. You can see the paintings here, the markings for the aircraft. That's how it looks today. But it actually looked like that at one time. And how do you pronounce that? Una dia Kia, right? A killer. Right, Eddie? Una dia Kia. And that's what it looked like. But this is the markings over there. And it's part of the 78th Fighter Group. Let me ask you a question. It has black squares. How many black squares in a 78th Fighter Group? How many white squares? 78. And also, it has the invasion stripes. Now, why would you have invasion stripes on the aircraft? You don't want to be shot down by friendly. You don't want to be hit by the close air support or anything like that. But anyway, that's that. And we just talk a little bit about the 78th Fighter Group, which are the markings for this aircraft. The Duxford Eagles, Duxford, England, storied career, big lineage, 1943 to 45. All that fighting was going on with the P-47 and, oh, by the way, P-51s as well. Big proponent of the D-Day invasion, June 6, 1944s. We had to extend members of that unit to keep them in there, to keep that experience because of the big mission that was coming up. They flew over. Their guidance was 78th Fighter Group, you stay in the air at dawn and you don't stop until Omaha, Utah Gold Juno Sword is recovered and is safe. And that's what they did. They flew 5 combat missions during that whole day to keep the air superiority intact. Through the whole month of June, they flew over 45 combat missions. These guys right here that we got the markings for right there. Many losses to keep air superiority. What is air superiority? It's just something that gives everybody that freedom of maneuver to allow them, the ground commander, to keep moving as far forward as possible. Finally, the World War II stats of the P-47, and they're pretty impressive more than anything else. And probably one of the key notes is certainly the bottom, 20 nations that used the Thunderbolt during that time, a very popular. And there was something I read that said, if you are going to send a picture home to your girl and you're in Europe in 1940s, stand next to a P-51. But if you're going to send a picture home to your wife and you're going to make it home, stand next to a P-47. And that's the truth in a lot of ways. The top 3 aces of the P-47 all returned home. Okay? That's about it in a nutshell. Thanks a lot. You see that? That's a quote from Henry Ford. You guys know who Henry Ford is? A lot of people don't know who Henry Ford is. Thanks a lot. Thank you.